as we've seen as the numbers rise in the south, it increases the risk of COVID getting through.
Tonight, 0 COVID-19 cases counted in Nunavut.
We now have 6,823 active cases across British Columbia.
Rolling out vaccines in BC.
It went to the heart of all the Indigenous women across the country and even globally.
And an outpouring of support for a Saskatchewan student after her school says no to ribbon skirts on formal day. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Nunavut announced just before New Year's there were 0 cases of active COVID-19 in the territory. Today they took questions from reporters for the first time since that announcement, and our Kent Driscoll was there.
The Premier confirmed the good news that came in just before New Year's Eve. Nunavut has 0 active cases of COVID-19. That means 265 Nunavummiut have recovered from COVID-19. Still, today wasn't all good news.
I'm very sad to report that 5 Nunavummiut have passed away due to COVID-19. 4 of these individuals contacted the virus in southern Canada, and it is likely their death will be reported in those jurisdictions.
Many Nunavummiut held parades when the 0 active cases were announced, but there are over 400 people in Nunavut still under investigation for possible COVID-19. Nunavut's Chief Public Health Officer thinks restrictions will be in place for some time to come.
At least another week or two. It depends on what happens in Arviat and Whale Cove, but it also depends on what happens in the south, where the numbers are rising. Even with the hubs, as we've seen, as the numbers rise in the south, it increases the risk of COVID getting through.
Nunavut's COVID vaccination program begins tomorrow at the Elders' Home in Iqaluit. After that, the first communities to receive it will be Cambridge Bay, Arviat, Joe Haven, and Iqaluit. The reason they were picked is pretty straightforward.
They have long-term care facilities for elders in each of those communities, and so it's important to get them protected as quickly as we can.
With other Canadian leaders facing criticism for their government members traveling for the holidays, we asked Premier Sivikita if any government members or senior staff left Nunavut over the vacation.
No, none have.
Then, at the end of the press conference, Sivikita came back to clarify. He was only talking about cabinet members and some senior staff, and he hadn't accounted for medical travel.
This is just to clarify about travel to the south, to make it clear that myself or no cabinet members have traveled south during the holidays. I can't speak for all senior staff, but I do have one of my senior staff that's down on medical travel.
Nunavut remains at 0 cases, and no one can really predict how long or even if that will last. For now, we all wait for more days with 0 cases and for the vaccine. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Well, with Canadian politicians being criticized across the country for traveling during the holidays, the Prime Minister today announced stricter restrictions to travel, and government officials gave an update on the new variant of the virus. Jamie Pashagumscum has the latest on that and the rolling out of vaccines this month.
The second wave came down hard on Quebec. Case records are shattered daily. Tomorrow afternoon, a government-ordered lockdown is expected to be announced. But Indigenous communities are already struggling.
If there was enough housing, enough shelter, enough roofs, a lot more people, a lot more of the street community would be isolated.
It's estimated at least a dozen homeless people in Montreal are COVID positive. With nowhere to go, they gather outside. And at night, the shelters are packed. The city says it plans to add more isolation beds to its largest emergency facility. Frontliners say they're needed now.
If the Army was deployed to go to the nursing homes, they can be deployed to help with the homeless, unless they just don't care about the homeless.
Cases are also up on Kahnawake Mohawk territory. There's an active outbreak at an elders lodge, and businesses are closed indefinitely.
The overall situation in Quebec is not going well.
Task Force head Lloyd Phillips called it a stark reminder, saying in a statement, quote, "This virus does not discriminate." About 700 kilometers east, the Mi'kmaq community of Listigouge reported 13 active cases this week after testing hundreds of community members.
We haven't had much experience with cases in the community. We've done a tremendous job of keeping COVID outside of here. And this is our first real experience with dealing with a significant number of cases. And I think you have some anxiety, some anger, and you also have outpouring of compassion and support. And I think that's the important part.
For now, the situation is stable in Nunavut, as it is on Cree territory. Grand Chief Abel Bosom says the Moderna vaccine rollout will begin there this week.
Yes, we certainly hope that this will be the answer to dealing with the COVID-19 problem in our region.
The Atikamekw communities of Manawan and Wimotashi are next in line for the vaccine. Public health is already on the ground in nearby Apitsawan, which saw a spike of 109 cases in the last month. 75 are considered active. Quebec's Indigenous Affairs Ministry told APTN News they're preoccupied by the number of cases both on and off reserve, but assure the public they're paying close attention. According to a ministry spokesperson, the vaccine rollout will continue on a community-by-community basis and only with the community's express consent. I'm Lindsay Richardson, and I'll have more on the province's vaccination plan coming up later this week on APTN National News.
That, of course, was the latest on the virus from Quebec. We go now to Ottawa and the latest from the Prime Minister and officials there.
Dr. Theresa Tam says she's concerned about the rapidly rising cases of COVID-19 over the holidays and says officials are keeping an eye on the new strains of the virus.
To date in Canada, there have been 9 cases of a variant virus first reported in the United Kingdom, and no reports of other variants of concern, including a variant first reported in South Africa.
Tam ensures that the vaccines are effective towards the new strains. Since the first doses of the novel coronavirus vaccine arrived last week, Canada is now on track to receive 1.2 million doses by the end of January. But there is growing skepticism that the government has been too slow to get the vaccine into the arms of Canadians. Major General Danny Fortin is in charge of the transportation of vaccines.
We are working diligently with manufacturers and federal, provincial, territorial, and Indigenous partners to ensure a continuous and predictable flow of vaccines.
In response to skeptics, Fortin says they are acquiring more equipment for transport and storage of vaccines.
I want to reaffirm to all Canadians that while quantities seem limited, we are scaling up.
In light of the criticism of government officials traveling during the holidays, the Prime Minister said he's disappointed.
We've been very clear. No one should be vacationing abroad right now. But if you still decide to travel at your own risk, you will need to show a negative COVID-19 test before you return, and you must self-isolate for 2 weeks when you get back. You need to take this seriously. Not following the rules could mean real consequences, including fines and prison time.
With vaccines continuing to arrive this month, Trudeau said his government is still on course to have all Canadians vaccinated by September 2021. Jamie Pashagamska, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Now to British Columbia, where health officials have announced how COVID-19 vaccinations will take place in that province. Here's Tina House.
BC continues to see the further spread of COVID-19, including a confirmed case of a more contagious COVID-19 variant on Vancouver Island. In this recent update by Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry, she says it's still going to be an uphill battle despite the rollout of vaccines.
We now have 6,823 active cases across British Columbia, of whom 351 people are in hospital, 76 of whom are in critical care or ICU. Additionally, we have 8,785 people under active public health monitoring.
In early December, BC received some of the doses of the Pfizer vaccine, and high-risk members of the population were given those immunizations. The Moderna vaccine was approved in mid-December, and those vaccines have also started to be distributed across BC. Since December, about 150,000 individuals have been given the vaccines, including 83,000 doses to long-term care and assisted living residents and staff, 2,000 doses for those awaiting placement in a long-term care home, 8,000 doses for essential visitors, 30,000 doses for hospital healthcare staff, paramedics, and public health workers, and 25,000 doses for remote and isolated First Nations communities.
There are many months left to go in this. We are constrained by logistics and also by how much vaccine we're receiving, but we're optimistic and we are focused intensely on making sure we protect people in long-term care and assisted living as quickly as we possibly can, and of course protect those most at risk in our communities.
Dr. Henry says the rollout for the general population is expected in the spring, but still urges caution.
I want to remind people that our orders are still in place, and we will be looking at what we need to do to get us through this next few months as we're ramping up our immunization program and able to protect more people in our community.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Time for a quick break. Still to come, the outrage over former Ontario Premier Mike Harris receiving the province's highest honor. Stick around. Welcome back. Former Ontario Premier Mike Harris is among those recently announced as a recipient of the Order of Ontario. Well, as you can imagine, there is outrage from First Nations in the province. The leaderships of the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians is among those, calling the honor a slap in the face to Indigenous peoples in Ontario. AIAI Grand Chief Joel Abram joins us now. Grand Chief Abram, appreciate you taking some time for us here today. In a press release, the Association of Iroquois and Allied Indians laid out a laundry list of reasons to be upset over Mike Harris receiving Ontario's highest honor. Would you mind going over some of those for our viewers?
I think the most important one is the incident at Stony Point Ipperwash, which resulted in a death of Dudley George, one of the members there. And again, we do have good reason to believe, and it was at the Ipperwash inquiry, it was actually the justice there said that he did believe that Mike Harris did utter the words, get those effing Indians out of the park. And not too long after that, Dudley George was shot and killed by Sergeant Kenneth Dean. So that's the major reason why most of us in this area are opposed to Mike Harris receiving this Order of Ontario.
You also say this is like putting up a big neon sign saying that reconciliation is a farce and that racism's even being celebrated with such an honor going to the former premier. What does that say about relations now between the province and Indigenous peoples in Ontario?
Well, it kind of gives you second thought, and again, I don't know who's responsible for the process about nominating and at the end of the day, approving who becomes a recipient of the Order of Ontario. But it gives us second thought behind why they would want to recognize. It's kind of tone deaf, I think, really, at the end of the day, what they did. And hopefully it's not indicative of the opinion of the Ontario government, and that they would honor someone who First Nation people believe was indirectly or directly responsible for the death of a First Nation member due to his own racist thoughts and actions.
The AIAI has called for the honor to be taken back or cancelled. Have you made a formal request to the province about this?
That's something that we'll be following up with this week, is sending a letter to the Lieutenant Governor General, because I believe that's the office that this order goes through. So we'll be following up with that, and also a letter to the Premier indicating our extreme displeasure and dissatisfaction with this award.
Well, Grand Chief Joel Abram will follow up with you on what you hear back on that. Appreciate you taking some time for us here today.
All right, thank you.
The fight against the controversial hydroelectric dam has ended in a courtroom in Happy Valley Goose Bay as the judge sentenced 16 Labrador land protectors for violating an injunction. The 16 each received a suspended sentence, and as long as they obey the injunction and undertake good behavior. 1 year ago, they were found guilty of breaking an injunction at Muskrat Falls that ordered people to not enter or block the worksite when the controversial hydroelectric dam was being built. The land defenders say the ecosystem is at risk and methyl mercury will poison the water. Labrador land protector Denise Cole remained defiant.
Judges aside, courtrooms aside, RCMP aside, we're the caretakers of these lands and waters, and we know that. And so our path never ends. This walk never ends. We just hope it gets to a place that we don't always have to fight.
Time to step aside for another quick break and then a show of support for a young lady who was made to feel embarrassed for wearing traditional attire. Stay with us. Welcome back. Let's take a peek now at our photo of the day. The shot was shared to us by Douglas Reynolds. We're not sure where in Saskatchewan this was taken, but if you have more beautiful moments like this, keep them coming. And you can send us your photos by emailing your shot to share@aptn.ca, and we'll do our best to get them on the air. Time now to take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, zeros with snow for Charlottetown and Halifax. Minus 14 in Kuujjuaq, 17 below for Inukjuak. Minus 1 in Montreal, 4 below in Saguenay. Plus 1 in Toronto, minus 2 for Sault Ste. Marie. Minus 2 with flurries in Thunder Bay, 5 below for Sioux Lookout. Minus 13 with snow in Churchill, minus 4 in Norway House and God's Lake. Minus 1 in Winnipeg, 0 with the sun out in Dauphin. Sun's out across southern Saskatchewan, 0 in Regina, plus 2 for Saskatoon. Minus 7 in Uranium City and Stony Rapids with snow. Over in northern Alberta, plus 1 with snow in Fort McMurray, 4 above in Grand Prairie. Plus 7 for Medicine Hat, 9 above in Lethbridge. Showers and plus 8 for Victoria, Vancouver and Campbell River. Plus 1 in Smithers, 2 above in Prince George. Minus 26 for Old Crow, 8 below in Whitehorse. Minus 9 with flurries in Yellowknife, minus 15 in Norman Wells. 20 below with snow in Sax Harbor, minus 22 in Paulatuck. Minus 20 with snow in Baker Lake, 23 below in Cambridge Bay. 30 below in Resolute, minus 35 for Igloolik. In December, a 10-year-old girl in Kamsack, Saskatchewan, went to school wearing her ribbon skirt. She was saddened and hurt by comments an educational assistant made about her traditional attire. But now people in town and on social media have come to give her their support. Priscilla Wolf has that story.
This is the first day back at school for Isabella Kulak after she was told by an educational assistant that her ribbon skirt wasn't considered formal wear for a school event on December 18th. Quinton Robertson, the director and CEO of Good Spirit School Division, says the incident is not being taken lightly.
We had an unfortunate incident involving a young student at KCI right before the Christmas break, where I think comments were made that brought to bear or brought to light some significant systemic racism. Racism that we know exists, but we were ignorant to.
This group of supporters, including some staff, walked Isabella to school on her first day back after the incident. Because of COVID restrictions, a large group could not gather, but people across North America were supporting her online. A Facebook group was created by supporters, and thousands of members have been posting pictures of themselves in ribbon skirts in solidarity. Cultural advisor and family spokesperson Judy Pelly says the incident struck a chord.
It went to the heart of all the Indigenous women across the country and even globally, but especially across Canada and the United States, that people are just flooding our with pictures of their ribbon skirts.
Pelly sees this as a turning point.
I think that there's been a big movement in the last decade, and especially maybe the last 5 years, in ribbon skirts symbolizing strength and resilience and power of our women. They're life givers and have always been powerful in our cultures and have lost that throughout the years, and now we're bringing it back.
Many people want to acknowledge a National Ribbon Skirt Day as a lesson and cultural awareness about the role of women and ribbon skirts. Robertson says they are on board.
Yeah, it was ironic, or was interesting that it was mentioned, because we had talked about designating December the 18th as Ribbon Skirt Day in the Good Spirit School Division. So we'll honor whatever the family, the First Nation, wants to put forward. And as I said, regardless of what happens nationally, that will be an event in the Good Spirit School Division.
The Good Spirit School Board says the comments by the educational assistant are an HR issue, and that is not being taken lightly. Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Kamsack.
What a great show of support. Imagine a ribbon skirt day. Well, Face to Face returns tonight with all new episode. Our guest is 23-year-old jingle dress dancer Michelle Chubb. 1 year ago, Chubb joined TikTok. Today, she has more than 340,000 followers.
The first post, it was actually about my lip, because a lot of people in my life have asked me about my lip, and I wanted to make that video. It was just for like a funny video. Just to like test the waters of the TikTok, and then people like that, and then I started showing my jingle dress, and then people loved that a lot more. So I started showing more of the traditional life of Indigenous people.
And you can catch that entire episode in about 1 minute's time. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.